Have you ever been with a group of people? You're physically there, but yet you still feel like you don't belong just because you don't speak Italian? I personally know that feeling all too well because it's exactly how I felt the first time I went to Italy and met my family. So if you're traveling to Italy soon and you want to be able to connect with the locals, your family, and maybe even your friends, then you might be wondering how to actually get started. My student Matthew recently shared this accomplishment of his inside the Italian Toolkit. When I can actually make logical sense out of sentence structures in Italian now. 3 years of Latin, 2 years of Spanish, 2 years of German, and 1 year of Japanese studies in school. And I was never able to do that. Was always stuck resorting to robotically memorizing test questions, dumb luck, and/or hoping to get a seat next to the smart kid on test days in order to pass the classes. But never did any of it even seem remotely logical. Thanks, Maria. It inspired me to create this video so you have some tips on how to optimize your learning and make logical sense out of it so you can feel like you belong when you talk to people in Italy. And it won't be totally boring like it would be in school. Ciao, mi chiamo Maria. I'm a native English speaker and I learned Italian academically for over 10 years. And I learned it so that I could go to Italy, get around on my own, and talk to my family. And the first step I go through with all my students is perfecting our pronunciation coming from English as best we can. I have a free guide to help you do just that so you can make sure that you're understood when you speak Italian. So make sure to click that link in the description and let's get going. Andiamo! If you've been on the channel for a while, you know that my father is from Calabria in Italia, and everyone thinks that I learned Italian growing up because he's a native, right? But nope, I barely learned a few words. I think I learned just the numbers, and that was about it. Everything changed when I went on my first trip to Italy, though. I was really excited to meet my family and ask them all these questions. And then I quickly realized, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, that I couldn't say more than just ciao, grazie, and they don't know English. I couldn't even ask cousins who were my age something simple about school, like, qual è la tua materia preferita? What's your favorite school subject? I couldn't even ask them about school. I felt really isolated in that moment, and I watched my father and my family in Italy have an amazing time, and I couldn't be a part of it. I mean, I was physically there, but I really didn't belong. So if you're determined to learn conversational Italian coming from English, here's my tips on how to optimize your learning and not waste time. My first tip is to focus on real-life conversation. And what do I mean by that? I studied Italian academically for years. Grammar drills, vocab lists, essays, all the boring things. And while it did build a solid foundation and help me out a little bit, it's not what got me conversational and actually speaking with my family. The real shift happened when I started learning on my own and I learned phrases that I knew I'd want to use in Italy. Things like di dove sei or prendo un caffè. And so when I returned to Italy, I was able to use those phrases aloud with my family. And even if I made little tiny grammatical mistakes here and there, I was still able to get my point across. And you know what? No one even cared about the tiny mistakes I made. They cared about actually connecting with me and having those conversations. And so bringing this back to Matthew from earlier, he had the same realization inside the toolkit. By focusing on practical conversation and saying things that matter the most to you, you reach a whole new level of understanding and confidence when it comes to speaking. So my pro tip for this is when you're in the moment and you're a beginner and you want to speak Italian, don't stress too much about the grammar because you'll just get overwhelmed and give up. Just focus on saying the words that will make sure that your point gets across. And in time, the grammar will come. My second tip would be to immerse yourself with the resources that you already have around you. Immersion is key to learning, but for those of us that don't live in Italy, there's ways to do it at home. And today it's even easier with the internet. This means watching Italian shows, listening to Italian music, reading Italian magazines, any sort of way that you can incorporate learning Italian at home. But don't just pick up like any random song or book. You want to learn from things that interest you so you can learn the vocabulary about your hobbies, your interests, things you'll want to talk about. And if you haven't noticed by now, I myself have a few YouTube videos on here that's specifically geared towards conversational Italian for English speakers. So hopefully those are helpful as well. A practical tip you can use right now is a shadowing technique so that when you do listen to things or watch shows, you're able to mimic exactly what's said. I have a whole YouTube video on that technique and I'll put it in the description below. My third tip is that speaking confidently is way more important than speaking perfectly. And this is for everyone out there who goes to Italy, tries to speak, and then just goes silent because you're afraid of making a mistake. I've been there, I get it. But when I let go of having that fear of saying something wrong or using a masculine term instead of a feminine term, and I just started speaking, I realized my errors weren't that big of a deal. And I was able to get my point across, and I was actually able to speak. And I wasn't that bad. So the tip here is that mistakes are part of the process, and instead of looking at them as a failure, you want to look at them as a win, as a positive, because you won't make that mistake again. And so just have the confidence, dive right in, you'll be okay. My fourth tip is probably the most important tip I could ever give you, and it's the way that I teach all my students. You have to learn the language that you want to learn. And this is how my students are able to go from their very first words to their first conversations as quickly as possible. Italian alone has like 450,000 words, but you don't need to know them all. To stay motivated, I made learning Italian personal. I made it my own by focusing on topics that I love. Like when I went to a family reunion in Italy, I wanted to be able to tell family stories of my brother and I growing up. And of course, I also wanted to be able to compliment my family's food. So I wasn't learning preset vocabulary that some teacher gave me elsewhere. I was learning the vocabulary that I wanted to learn, that I knew I would talk about when I went to Italy. This kept me so excited, and it made the vocabulary stick because it mattered to me. So my pro tip here is to learn the vocabulary and phrases that matter most to you so that when you do speak Italian, you're confident and you're excited about it. If you have a similar story where you felt totally isolated in an Italian conversation, but you could have interacted had you just known a few more words and phrases, comment below. I'm sure we all share a similar story. My last tip here is to stay consistent. When I learned in school, we had exams, and those were not fun to study for, putting it bluntly. My friends and I would go to the library after school and just open up our textbooks and study for hours. It was after I graduated and I didn't have exams anymore that I realized that having short, consistent study sessions was so much more effective in getting me conversational than sitting and reading a book for hours. It's like flexing a muscle and you don't get overwhelmed. So having those short 5 minutes a day could really benefit your learning. And even better than those 5 minutes a day, you can top that with adding Italian into your daily life, like following Italian people on the internet or watching Italian TV shows, just a little bit every day. You don't need to be perfect. Just focus on speaking confidently, personalizing your learning, and practicing consistently. You've got this. This is all so much more encouraging and motivating and applicable than just repeating random grammar rules and conjugation tables that you don't need to be saying when you go to Italy. When you have a conversation with someone, you don't need to say mangio, mangi, mangia, mangiamo, mangiate, mangiano, but you do need to be able to say io mangio la pizza e tu cosa mangi? This real life, practical, conversational focus isn't necessarily how I first started learning Italian, but it is how I teach. Because who really wants to spend hours reading a textbook? And like I said, it's the strategy we use inside the Italian Toolkit program where my students are able to go from their first words to conversations quickly. So if you want to learn with this method or just try it out, click the link in the description below. You could try a free lesson with me. It's specifically geared towards beginning Italian for English speakers. So if you're the right fit for that, check it out. Remember to hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out when I post a new lesson. And speaking of lessons, if you want to check out my new video, you can check it out right here. Ci vediamo alla prossima. Ciao!